When a school introduces and trains each child of society into membership with such a little community, saturating him with the spirit of service and providing him the instruments of effective self-direction, we shall have the deepest guarantee of a larger society which is worthy, lovely, and harmonious, based on John Dewey. This only means that education plays a vital role in molding society in its progress. But for us to know when it all started, let's take a look on how people educate themselves way back long ago. In primitive societies, pre-literate persons face the problem of survival in an environment. In order for them to survive, they need food, shelter, warmth, and clothing. But not only that, they also have to survive from different threats of nature, like different wild animals, bad weather, and volcanic eruption, and many more. To transform a hostile environment into one that is sustaining life, humankind develop life skills that become cultural patterns. This includes making tools, instruments, moral values, and language. Early humankind found security in group life based on cultural patterns. Life in the human group was educational as children observed elders and as they taught by their parents. For this cultural pattern to continue, the adults had to teach these skills and values to their children. And this process is called socialization, which is a function of education in society. Socialization is the process by which individuals internalize the norms and values of society, and so social continuity are attained. To sum up, during primitive society period, the way of education was learning from their environment how to survive, developing life skills for survival. So if we are enjoying the four corners of our classroom today, our ancestors had their educational learning in a wide environment.
Key periods in educational history. 4 categories of education in each period: educational goals, curriculum, agents, influences on Western education. The primitive societies. Its educational goals is to teach group survival skills to cultivate group cohesiveness. Curriculum, practical skills of hunting, fishing, food gathering, stories, myths, songs, poems, dances. Agents, parents, tribal elders, and priests. Influences on Western education. Emphasis on the role of informal education in transmission of skills and values. The Greek. Educational goals to cultivate civic responsibility and identity with city-state. In Athenian, to develop well-rounded person, and Sparta, to develop soldiers and military leaders. Curriculum. Athenian, reading, writing, arithmetic, drama, music, physical education, literature, poetry. For Sparta, drill, military songs, and tactics. Agents. For Athens, private teachers and school sophists, philosophers. For Sparta, military teachers, drill sergeants. Influences on Western education. Athens, the concept of the well-rounded, liberally educated person. Sparta, the concept of the military state. In the Roman, its educational goals is to develop sense of civic responsibility for republic and then empire to develop administrative and military skills. The curriculum, reading, writing, arithmetic, laws of 12 tables, law of philosophy. Agents, private school and teachers, schools of rhetoric. Influences on Western education. Emphasis ability to use education for practical administrative skills relating education to civic responsibility. Arabic. Educational goals. To cultivate religious commitment to Islamic belief, to develop expertise in mathematics, medicine, and science. Curriculum, reading, writing, literature, scientific studies. Agents, mosques, courts, and schools. Influences on Western education. Arabic numerals and computation, re-entry of classical materials on science and medicine. The medieval. Educational goals to develop religious commitment, knowledge, and ritual to establish social order to prepare persons for appropriate roles. Curriculum, reading, writing, arithmetic, liberal arts, philosophy, theology, crafts, military tactics, and chivalry. Agents, parish chantry and cathedral schools, universities, apprenticeship, knighthood. The influences on Western education is to establishing the structure, content, and organization of the university as a major institution of higher education, the institutional and preservation of knowledge. The Renaissance, educational goals to cultivate a humanist who was expert in the classic Greek and Latin to prepare courtiers for service to dynastic leaders. Curriculum, Latin, Greek, classical literature, poetry, art. Agents, classical humanist education in schools such as lycée, gymnasium, Latin grammar school. Influences on Western education, an emphasis on literary knowledge, excellence, and style as expressed in classical literature, a two-track system of schools. And the Reformation, educational goals to cultivate a sense of commitment to a particular religious denomination to cultivate general literacy. Curriculum, reading, writing, arithmetic, catechism, religious concept, and rituals, Latin and Greek theology. Agents, vernacular elementary schools for the masses, classical schools for the upper classes. Influences on Western education, a commitment to the universal education to provide literacy to the masses, the origin of the school system with supervision to ensure the doctrinal conformity.
The history of the Philippine education system. As we study the summary of the Philippine education system, just remember this sociological concept which is focused on this chapter, that education is a function of society and what are taught in school arises from the nature and character of society itself. Philippines pre-colonial period. Education during the pre-colonial period. During pre-Spanish period, children were given a rudiments of education in both academic and vocation. The type of education is informal and unstructured. The home served as their school, the parents served as their teachers, tribal tutor, the baybaylan. The father trained his son in manual labors like hunting, fishing, mining, and shipbuilding, while the mother trained her daughter in clothing, cooking, gardening, serving, and other household chores. Spanish period or Spanish era. With the coming of Spain, the European system of education was introduced to the archipelago. Missionaries established primary school, colleges, and universities. Education is formal and organized. They aim to make the native Filipino obedient and God-fearing Christian. This is why religion was a compulsory subject of all levels. In addition to religion, the nature of children were taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and some vocational and practical arts subject. There was no co-education during the Spanish time. Boys and girls studied in separate schools. During the early part of 17th century, colleges and universities were established, which were originally open only the Spanish and those with Spanish blood. It was only during the 19th century that this university began accepting native Filipinos. For early 300 years, education in the Philippines was the primary responsibility of the Catholic Church. The missionaries established the school, provided the teacher and the facilities, and decided what could be taught. It was only the last half of the 19th century that the government took an active part of promoting education in the colony. Hence, education during pre-colonial period was geared toward their needs because of colonialization by several foreign countries and several changes. But still, some of Asian teaching, which are practical even, in the present were retained.
The Education Decree of 1863. This law gave Filipinos a complete system of education from elementary to the collegiate level. This law also provided for the establishment of the elementary schools in all municipalities in the country. The schools were separated from boys and girls. Although religion was the core of the curriculum included subjects reading, writing, arithmetic, and history, Christian doctrine, Spanish language, and vocal music, agriculture for the boys, and needlework for the girls. Attendance in school was compulsory between ages of 7 to 12. Let's tackle about the education during American regime from 1898 to 1946. The American promoted a democratic ideals and the democratic way of life. The schools maintained by the Spaniards for more than 3 centuries were closed but were reopened on August 29, 1898 by the Secretary of the Interior. The curriculum here in this period was based on the ideals and traditions of America, the hierarchy of values. The medium of instruction was English language. The Malolos Constitution established a system of free and compulsory education. In May 1898, the first American school was established in the Corregidor, and shortly after the capture of Manila in 1899, 7 schools were opened in the city. Training was done through the schools, both public and secular, manned by chaplains and military officers to the U.S. Army. University of the Philippines was founded in 1908. UP was the first state school of university status. Thomasites arrived in the Philippines on August 23, 1901. They called us the first teachers because they came on board in the SS Thomas. The Department of Public Instruction set up a 3-level school system. The first level considered a 4-year primary and 3-year intermediate or 7-year curriculum. The second level was a 4-year junior college and later a 4-year program. Additional knowledge. The students who excelled academically were sent to the U.S. to continue their studies and to become expert in their desired field or professions. They called us scholars because the government provided all their expenses. In return, they were to teach or work in the government offices after they finished their degree. Education became a very important issue for the United States colonial government since it allowed to spread their cultural values, particularly the English language, to the Filipino people. Instruction in American history led to forming of national identity and Filipino nationalism. Therefore, the educational system in this period was democratic, organized, formal, and structured. Thank you.
Commonwealth Period. What is Commonwealth Period? The Philippine Commonwealth Period was the name of the Philippines when it was still controlled by the United States. Manuel L. Quezon was the first Filipino to head an elected government in the Philippines. Philippine education system during the Commonwealth Period. All schools should develop moral character, civic conscience, personal discipline, and vocational efficiency. Methods used are the memorization, recitation, and socialized recitation. In terms of socialized recitation, this method of teaching of a subject that proves appropriate opportunities to the learners in a group of situation for the acquisition of the desired knowledge and experiences related to a particular topic through their cooperative efforts, mutual discussions, and freedom of self-expression. Here is the table of the Philippine educational system of the Commonwealth Period. The moral character, they taught values, self-discipline, controlling and motivating oneself. The civic consciousness is the social consciousness or civic in terms of equal rights, and vocational efficiency is the conservation of resources, both human and natural. Commonwealth Act number 586. This is known as the Education Act of 1940. Was approved on August 7, 1940 by the Philippine Assembly. So the law provided for the following: the reduction of 7. They removed they supposed to include grade 7 from the elementary grade, but in that time they separated. They put grade 7 into the high school, and the elementary now has only 6 year. B is the fixing of school entrance age to 7. That is, they require the students to have, or they must be on the age of 7 in order to partake in the school. C is the national support of elementary education, compulsory attendance, and the primary grades for all children who enrolled in grade 1, and the introduction of double single session, wherein one class in the morning and another in the afternoon, under one teacher to accommodate more children. Abolish grade 7, so as I said earlier, they moved grade 7 from the elementary school. So morning and afternoon class starts from June to March instead of July to April. The teachers should manage students. And opening should be June to March. Commonwealth Act number 180. So it is known as the private school law. This was known as the private school law, which made obligatory the recognition and inspection of private schools and colleges by the Secretary of Public Instruction, so as to maintain a standard of efficiency in all private schools and colleges. This is the law of the private school. And the other Commonwealth. Japanese occupation. Military Order number 2. These are the Japanese educational policies were embodied. The Philippine Executive Commission established the Commission of Education, Health, and Public Welfare, and schools were opened in June 1942 with 300,000 students. Japanese culture and language were offered as a compulsory courses in the school. Japanese also taught culture and language were included in the civil service exam, emphasizing vocational education, physical education, and Japanese literature. Under the Japanese regime, the teaching of Tagalog, Philippine history, and character education was reserved for Filipinos. Love for the work and dignity of labor was emphasized. Curriculum. School calendar became longer. No summer vacation for students. They prohibited the summer vacation. Class size increased to 60. It's too many. Deleted anti-opinions. Banned singing of American songs. Deleted American symbols, poems, and pictures. Nihongo as a means of introducing, cultivating love for Japanese culture and the social studies. So here are the 6 basic principles of Japanese education. Number 1 is the realization of new order and promote friendly relations between Japan and the Philippines to the farthest extent. Number 2, foster a new Filipino culture base. Number 3, endeavor to elevate the morals of people, giving up overemphasis on materialism. Number 4, diffusion of the Japanese language in the Philippines. Number 5, promotion of vocational course. Number 6, to inspire people with spirit to love neighbors. Take note, Spanish reigned for 300 years, Americans reigned for 50 years, and the Japanese reigned for about 4 years. So it is thus not surprising that despite the measure they had instituted, Japanese failed to succeed in transforming the values and attitudes of the people in line with their vision in the new order. The contributory factor was widely reported brutalities that ushered in the Japanese occupation that the Filipinos did not experience with the same degree during the American period. Ministry of Education and the Department of Public Instruction. October 14, 1943, the Japanese-sponsored republic created the Ministry of Education. 1978, by the breach of PD number 1397, it became the Ministry of Education and Culture. 1982, the Education Act of 192 created the Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sports. 1987, that later became the Department of Education, Culture, and Sports by virtue of Executive Order number 117. Department of Instruction. So in February 27, 1945, the Department of Instruction was made part of the Department of Public Instruction. 1947, by the virtue of Executive Order Number 94, the Department of Instruction was changed to Department of Education. In 1972, it became the Department of Education and Culture by virtue of Proclamation 1081. So the trifocal system of the Department of Education, Culture and Sports, or DEC, refocus to basic education, which covers elementary, secondary, and non-formal education, including sports and culture. Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, or TESDA, now administers the post-secondary, middle-level manpower training and development, while the Commission on Higher Education, or CHED, is responsible for higher education.
Post-colonial Philippines. Post-colonial education aimed at the full realization of the democratic ideals and way of life. The civil service eligibility of teachers was made permanent pursuant to Republic Act 1079 in June 15, 1554. A daily flag ceremony was made compulsory in all schools, including the singing of national anthem pursuant to Republic Act 1265, approved on June 11, 1955. Curricular offerings in all schools, the life, the works, and writings of Jose Rizal, especially the Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, shall be included in all levels. Elementary education was nationalized and matriculation fees were abolished. Magna Carta for teachers was passed into law by virtue of Republic Act 4670. The fundamental aims of education in the 1973 constitutions are the following: foster love of country, teach the duties of citizenship, develop moral character, self-discipline, and scientific, technological, and vocational efficiency. As the time passed, there are other developments happened in the educational system in the Philippines. We have integration of all values in all learning areas and possess a mastery learning. YDT and CAT introduce as new courses the Media of Instruction Bilingual Education Policy, which mandates the use of English and Filipino separately as media of instruction in schools. We have Education Act of 1982, which created the Minister of Education, Culture, and Sports. We also have the NCEE, or the National College Entrance Examination, another Executive Order number 117 signed by President Corazon C. Aquino, renamed Minister of Education, Culture, and Sports into DEX in 1987, or Department of Education, Culture, and Sports. Another development in the creation of Board of Professional Teachers, composed of 5 under PRC, or the Profession Regulation Commission. The replacement of PIBAT, or the Professional Board Examination for Teachers, by LET, or Licensure Examination for Teachers. Another development is the transfer of authority of administering licensure examination for teachers from Civil Service Commission and Department of Education, Culture, and Sports to the Board of Professional Teachers under PRC. Trifocalization of education system was also introduced as another development of our educational system. Bifocal education system refocused DEX mandates to basic education, which cover elementary, secondary, and non-formal education, including culture and sports. TESDA now administer the post-secondary, middle-level manpower training and development by virtue of Republic Act 7796. CHED, or the Commission in Higher Education, is responsible for higher education by virtue of Republic Act 7722 or the Higher Education Act of 1994. And August 2021, Republic Act 9155, otherwise called the Governance of Basic Education Act, was passed, transforming the name Department of Education, Culture and Sports or DEX to the Department of Education or DepEd, and refining the role of field offices like regional offices, division offices, and schools. In August 2021, Republic Act 9155, otherwise called the Governance of Basic Education Act, was passed, transforming the name Department of Education, Culture, and Sports to the Department of Education or DepEd, and the refining role of field offices like regional offices, division offices, and schools. Republic Act 9155 provide overall framework, for example, school head empowerment by strengthening their leadership roles, and second, school-based management in the context of transparency and local accountability. The goal of basic education is to provide the school-age population and young adults with skills, knowledge, and values to become caring, self-reliant, productive, and patriotic citizens. Values education is offered as a separate subject in the new secondary education curriculum and integrated in all subject areas in both curricular. Again, INSEC means the new secondary education curriculum. In January 2012, Republic Act 1015 was approved. It is also known as the Kindergarten Act. It is an act institutionalizing the kindergarten education into the basic education system. On May 15, 2013, Republic Act 10533, also known as the K-12 program, was passed. The K-12 program covers kindergarten and 12 years of basic education. That is, 6 years of primary education, 4 years of junior high school, and 2 years of senior high school to provide sufficient time for mastery of concept and skills, develop lifelong learners, and prepare graduates for tertiary education, middle-level skills, and development, employment, entrepreneurship. Why do we have to bother with the educational goals of the past, which is past, and so we can no longer undo it? So, it has 3 reasons. Number 1, educational issues and problems are often rooted in the past. The study of educational history can help us to understand and solve today's problems. Number 2, realistic effort to reform education begins with present conditions, which are a product of our past. By using our past, we can shape our future. And lastly, the study of education's past provides a perspective that explains and illuminates our present activities as teachers.